Hey guys, I'm out here working on the 1972 Corvette project, and I'm trying to get the frame ready to be sandblasted and then painted. But before we do that, now's the time to do any welding and add any kind of brackets that I know that need to be added to the frame. So I just want to look at some of those things and show you all some of the things we're going to beef up. The factory frame has a lot of things that can be improved to make it stronger and stiffer. So from the factory, this car had an LT1 in 1972, which was rated at 255 horsepower, and I plan on putting in a 416 cubic inch stroker forged LS3 that'll be making double that. It'll be making maybe 550 horsepower naturally aspirated, and then I plan to have nitrous for backup. So we'll be making more than double, close to triple the horsepower, and I would like to take this thing on some road course racing, and all of those things are going to put extra strain on the frame and the chassis. So anything we can do to beef it up will help. And there's actually companies that sell kits for installing gussets in some of the weak spots. So I'm planning on welding some of those in. You can see this gusset kit that I got here it's all laser cut pieces. So this piece right here is for stiffening up the engine mount. And you've got the same thing right there, it's basically a mirror image. And then both of these are for adding extra support to the lower control arm brackets. So one goes here and the other one basically goes on the opposite side. I'm probably only going to install one of those because I think one is adding a huge amount of support to this. Two is probably, every bit helps, but I also don't want to add a whole bunch of plates in here that's restricting my access back up to the engine later on. So I think one will be plenty. And then this right here is intended to go right here because most of the Corvettes have basically this channel comes out a lot further. It's not cut back like this. So apparently on this year they had it cut back. So I don't know if I'll do anything here. But right here is where the sway bar attaches. So I guess there's a lot of issues with this flexing up and down under a lot of strain. So I may just cut this up and just weld a little triangle brace right in here just to add some extra support to this bottom piece. Now, one of the other big things that we're going to be doing to try and beef it up is just adding extra welds to the frame. So most of this frame is just two C-channels welded together, but they didn't do continuous welds. It's, maybe halfway or maybe a third of the way is welded. I'll just start from the back and show you right here. This doesn't have hardly any welds on it. Let's see, you got one weld right there, and then all this is open. Of course, this is at the back of the car, not that important, just where it's holding the gas tank. And then, like right here, this is holding a lot of weight. This is basically carrying the whole rear of the body, which the body is a lot heavier than you would think. It's the whole bird cage, as you call it, which is the interior framing of the car and all that sort of stuff, which it's also carried right here. But I'm gonna extend the welds all the way across there just to get a little more strength. Basically everywhere you see that I knocked off the rust with my wire wheel is where I plan on adding some welds. You can see I'm gonna add some welds across here. And then also one of the big things that caught my eye, and people mention this, I'm on a few different groups and they were talking about even just going back over some of the factory welds. So like right there, that's a big drop. I'm trying to get a good camera angle where y'all can see the issue. So I'm gonna hold my knife on the surface, slide it across, and at the tip of my knife, you should be able to see there's a big gap downward, right down there. So that's a huge issue. That when they welded that is not nearly as strong as it could be because basically they had the heat up high enough that it was melting through this material. And right here, they pretty much made a weak point where the frame is probably half the thickness of what it is, or what it should be, because they cut down into it. And it's kind of like that intermittently all across this weld. And I'm gonna go back over and add material there, try to strengthen up those welds. But there's a number of ways you can create that issue when you're welding. One, you could have the heat turned up too high. Two, you could just be not filling enough material. So if it's a MIG welder, you'd have the wire feed speed too low. Up here, it's just as bad. You can see at that weld right there, huge gap. So we're gonna weld back over that, add some strength to it, and then we'll weld these brackets in. So today I'll be welding with this inverter type Lincoln 205 amp TIG welder. Just to give you a real broad overview, right over here, the main bread and butter settings are AC with the sine wave, and then DC, which is what we'll be using for welding steel. You typically use AC for welding aluminum. Over here is our max amperage setting, and I won't go into all these. There's 1,000 different things you can change, but I say max amperage setting because with a TIG welder, you can regulate how much ampacity you're giving to the weld while you're welding. So this is typically the most difficult type of welding between the main categories. You've got MIG, TIG, and stick. So with this, you're having to use 3 different components, 3 different limbs of your body, so to speak. You're having to hold this, which has the electrode, which is creating the arc, in one hand. You can see I've already started here. And then you have to hold the filler rod in the other hand. So you're actually feeding the filler rod into the weld as needed. And then with your foot, you're controlling the amperage, which can, if you go full pedal, that's going to give you the max setting of whatever that's set to. And here's the first weld that we did. And then there's the second one, and then the third one for this body support bracket. So now I'm going to set the camera back and start welding away. Oh, wow. Okay, so all of that popping while I was welding was contamination that's in the weld. And now you can actually see, I'm guessing that was maybe grease that was up under the frame, and now it's melting and turning to liquid. So it's actually coming out of the old weld through a little gap. So I'm sure that's part of what was causing all the popping and spitting and spattering back here. There's probably some back there as well. So the first thing I'll do is just a little tack weld on the corner. I'm not even going to use filler material. I'll just let that corner melt in and become the filler material. You hear how quiet it is? That's a good sign. That means we're not hitting a bunch of contamination. That weld was not clean at all, so I feel like the metal was pretty clean, so I'm thinking my electrode may have been contaminated. A lot of times when the metal is popping and spattering, some of that spatter will land on the electrode, and if it's contaminated, it's just as bad as having contamination in your weld, if not worse. Let's try again. Yeah, I think that's what the problem was. It's going much smoother now. Unfortunately, the first part of the weld has that contaminated portion, and it's very difficult to get that to clean up once it's there. I'll try going back over the first part, see if I can clean it up at all. Hey guys, so what happened there was the electrode was contaminated, and so all we do is just loosen up this handle right here, which tightens down on a collet, which is what holds the electrode in place. Then we're able to pull the electrode out. Sometimes you gotta fight with it a little bit. So what I'll do is just take it over to the grinder, and I'll just knock the surface off of the end of the electrode and kind of get it back down to a point. Some of this right here could actually be steel that is contaminated on the electrode. And the electrode is primarily tungsten. So it needs to be tungsten, not other materials that have spattered onto there. Okay, now you can see that tungsten is raw tungsten. It's not contaminated with a bunch of junk anymore. So there's still a little bit of a gap between my gusset and the K-member, but instead of using a bunch of filler rod to try and build that gap and follow this line, I'm just gonna let the gusset melt down and use that as the filler, because you can see I've got at least probably 3/8 of an inch of overlap onto the lip of the K-member anyways. So we've got plenty of room to allow this to draw back from the edge and use it as filler. That's one of the nice things about TIG welding. You don't always have to use filler. All right, guys, I think we're done welding. We've beefed up the frame all along the way here. I also added a little bit of welds to these corner braces, and I've seen pictures of some people with the older C3s or maybe even C2s. I'm not sure what year. I just know something before 1972 where they did not even have this corner brace here. So I'm glad that we have that. Adds a little extra strength. So we just added these extra welds all along the way. Got our gussets in place right here for the lower control arm brackets. And I ended up adding those little triangulated pieces to strengthen up the mount to the for the sway bar. All right, guys, so I think that's all for the welding. Now, to get it ready for sandblasting, I just have to decide what else I want to take off of it. I haven't decided if I want to remove the lower control arms or just remove the spindles. I don't know. Y'all let me know what you think makes sense. I guess one thing is it's got these poly bushings right here. I don't know if that'd be an issue with sandblasting. I guess if they're trying to sandblast this, those could get tore up or get sand maybe in the bushings. I don't know. I've never had anything sandblasted before, so I'd be curious to hear y'all's thoughts on what I should leave in place. I know here on the back I can easily remove my swing arms. I've just got a bolt temporarily in there, so I'll just snatch that out to pull those out. And then of course I'll remove my sway bar, but Other than that, like I said, the front end stuff is what I'm not real sure on, what I want to leave in place. And also got the front spring, which I think the spring is actually, I think it's composite. I don't know. I don't know if it's composite or aluminum or what. I'll need to look into that, and probably just plan on pulling it off because it's not like it needs to be, you know, sanded down or sandblasted or anything like that. All right, guys, I think that's about it. Jet, you about ready for dinner? Yeah, good boy. All right, guys, well, thanks for watching. If there's anything in particular on the channel you'd like to see more of or less of, just let me know. And until then, have a good one. Bye.